Enraged protesters take to the streets in Afghanistan as outrage erupted over the burning of a Quran at a small church in Florida that took place late last month. The demonstrations that followed have turned deadly, with the AP reporting that at least 21 people have been killed since Friday. Now, the man responsible is Pastor Terry Jones, the same man who threatened the hateful act last year during the heated debate over the proposed Ground Zero mosque. Now, because of his actions, the lives of our brave men and women serving overseas may be even more in jeopardy. General David Petraeus attempted to quell the anti-American sentiment by denouncing the burning of the Quran.
We condemn the action of an individual in the United States who burned a holy Quran. That action was hateful, it was intolerant, and it was extremely disrespectful. And again, we condemn it in the strongest manner possible.
And joining me now with reaction are the hosts of True Talk radio show on WMNF and the founder of United American Voices for America, Ahmed Badir, and the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Zuhdi Jasser, is back with us. Guys, thanks for being here. Ahmed, let me start with you.
Thank you.
I interviewed the pastor on my radio show today, and I think if General Petraeus and Secretary of Defense Gates say that this is going to put our troops in jeopardy, I think as an American citizen, you have a right to understand it's their lives on the line and that we should honor their request. But he does have freedom of speech to do it. Your reaction?
Well, obviously, he does have freedom of speech. I mean, we have Americans have freedom of speech to goose step and wave Nazi flags outside synagogues. But is it the right thing to do? I don't think so. We live in the United States of America, not the divided states of America. Terry Jones is irresponsible. What he did was immoral, and frankly, is an act of being an idiot. But the people responding with violence is more idiotic.
Well, what's immoral about it?
Well, putting our troops' harms at risk. He knows specifically. The president said it.
Okay.
Clinton said it. No, I mean, he has the right to do it, but just because you have the right to doesn't mean it's the right. It doesn't mean it's the right thing or the good thing to do, especially when you're harming the very same people that are trying to keep you free. And everybody around the world is telling you it's going to put troops' lives at risk, other people's lives at risk. And as a man of God, you need to bring peace. If you're following the footsteps of Jesus, Jesus is a peacemaker. You need to have that compassion like Jesus did.
Oh, I just think, you know what, we've got to consider that the risk that this may pose. Now, with that said, Zuhdi, let me ask you this question, because I think you agree with us that he shouldn't have done it. He should have listened to Secretary Gates and General Petraeus. You agree on that point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you, I think that the issue is much bigger than this, though, is we as Muslims, I'll let the rest of America and the bishops and the pastors and the rabbis condemn him and show him to be the marginal, demented moron that he is. But at the end of the day, I as a Muslim, and I hope Ahmed and others that claim to be leaders of the Muslim community see that there's no moral equivalency here, that simply burning a scripture is not equivalent to the murder and the violence that happened. And not to mention, Jones is just one part of this bigger picture of freedom of speech, which we see with Geert Wilders on trial in Europe, which we see with the Christian minister in Pakistan that was murdered because he wanted to speak against blasphemy laws, which we see in Canada with Ezra Levant, which a rally in Orange County that now they have misrepresented and they're putting on a commission. So, the issue is a much bigger one in the front lines.
Listen, how many times have we seen images of American flags in the Middle East being burnt? How many times have we seen not
a single
President
time
Bush
during the revolutions that are happening right now.
Well, burned in effigy is another case. There have been incidents of Bible burnings in the past that have come up. In 2009, our own government, Bibles that have been sent over. Why is it if there's a cartoon that some people in the Islamic faith find offensive, why is it this reaction? And why don't we see the reaction comparable in other religions?
Well, I think that what has to happen is that we need reform. We need to separate mosque and state. This concept that the state should be Islamic, that law, especially they say Sharia law needs to be in government. They then empower themselves to be oppressive, autocratic, and oligarchical to where they tie the speech against Islam to sedition, to the state's power, etc. And until Muslims, American Muslims especially, start leading movements to separate mosque and state and say that we speak against political movements like the Brotherhood and others, that so many groups, and I would call on Mr. Badir to speak out against political Islam and the Brotherhood and other groups that advocate for laws that prevent complete free speech to where there is nothing protected. Because I'll remind you, our founding fathers...
Let's get a word in here.
Yeah, Mr. Badir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Well, why is there this double standard? Go ahead.
I don't think there's any double standard whatsoever. Terry Jones and everybody has the right to say what they want.
No.
I don't have a lot of this country, we also have the right to...
Hang on a second.
But we have to address what Zodia just said.
But there's in as much as if there's a cartoon that is offensive to Muslims, if in this case a Quran is burned, give me a comparable example where there is this reaction, where 21 people died, violent reaction, because people are offended by the actions of an obscure minister in Florida, in Afghanistan.
No, it's not about the obscure. It's not about the obscure minister. If you saw what the press release of what Al Qaeda or the Taliban had said in Afghanistan, they said that the Western media and Western governments have dismissed this as free speech. Instead of considering the resolution and condemning Terry Jones after the fact, our government should have been condemning him before the fact.
Who should? You just heard General Petraeus condemn it. He said it was evil.
I'm saying who
do you want to condemn this?
The key word here, Sean, with your selective hearing, is condemning it after the fact. We should have condemned it. This happened on March 20th.
Who do you want to condemn
this in the butt back then. But condemn the hatred against... Let me finish. I think Zodia had plenty to say. Let me just explain myself so I could have a word in.
We don't have a lot of time.
If we would have done this beforehand, if we would have condemned it way beforehand, then this would have had nipped the violence and it wouldn't have happened. I think the people there are violently reacting, not about the Quran necessarily, but because
the last time, which is why he stopped it. Why do people react this way?
Their anger there is because they're under a 10-year occupation. They've seen tens of thousands of their own people getting killed. The occupation continues to be a problem there.
You are justifying it here, Ahmed.
No, of course not. It's not justified. No, it's not justified.
You have to recognize, what you haven't recognized is that there's a continuum of radicalization, that this is just one endpoint of an ideology of political Islam that feeds into this type of ideology.
Just because I provide an explanation does not mean it's justification.
Thanks for being with us. It's time now to check in with for a sneak peek at what's coming up on the record tonight.
Wow, things are hot in New York, but if you think that's bad, you should see what's going on in Wisconsin. The meanest, most vicious, nastiest election is tomorrow, and it's not politicians and politicians. It's for the state Supreme Court, which has an impact on what's going on with the governor and his opponents. That's just for starters. Plus, Dr. Henry Kissinger is here. He's going to explain why the Ivory Coast, where there are more than 1,000 massacred, why we're not doing anything there, but we are in Libya. Some people say, well, why are we doing it in Libya but not Ivory Coast? So he'll explain it to us. So back to you, Sean. Back to that fight.
Dr. Kissinger was here last week, and I did my bottom balasi. My imitation. He didn't like it. He didn't think it was any good.
Can you do your Bill O'Reilly imitation, Glenn Beck, for everybody? Everyone wants to see it.
We're looking out for something like that. I don't know. All right.
This is a factor investigation.
I'll do you tomorrow night, and then I'll do Bill Clinton on Friday.
This is a no-spin zone.
Let not your heart be troubled. Our great American panel is next. And tonight on our great American panel, he is a nationally syndicated columnist, executive vice president of Edelman PR. The one and only Tony Blankley is back. She is a former advisor to Hillary Clinton. Fox News contributor Jamu Green is back, and he's the author of the brand new book. By the way, I bet a bestseller. Gangster Government, Barack Obama and the New Washington Thugocracy. Wow. That's David Verdozo is back with us. How are you? Congratulations on the book. By the way, I just got a hold of it today, and thank you for signing it. And I am very honored, and it couldn't be more timely with the unions and everything else that you've. How did you know? Did you somebody upstairs would love you?
Well, that may be the case, but I certainly believe so. But thank you, Sean, for your kind words.
Thank you. All right, Howard Dean lashes out at the Fox News channel. The same Howard Dean rooting for a government shutdown. Let's roll the tape.
Bias is not the problem. It's something that makes us mad, but it's not the problem. It's when you become a propaganda outlet. What Fox News says is often not true, and they know it's not true, and they say it anyway. It is not a news organization. It is a very expensive, incredibly well-funded right-wing propaganda organization.
All right, something's going on here, because you got Media Matters waging guerrilla warfare, to quote their term, or their leader's term, Is this a fundraising tool, or is this an effort to silence opposition and critics?
I think it's an effort to silence, and it's obviously not going to work. And interestingly, given that the president chose to do an interview with Fox, it undercuts the argument, which is preposterous, that it's not a news organization. So I think it shows their respect for the power of Fox Communication. And, I've been saying for a while the difference between 1995, when we had the government shut down, and now is that with Fox we're going to get fair coverage of both sides of the story.
Yeah, Jammu, there were people in the Hillary Clinton camp when, in the last campaign, they were thankful, backdooring me, saying, you're the only one that's taken on Barack Obama's past record and associations. They appreciated the work I was doing.
Well, I know. I got a lot of airtime during the primary, but I think we have to look at this for what it is. Governor Dean wasn't getting a lot of coverage, and to get your street cred on the left, you do need to beat up on Fox a little bit. I agree with Tony that this is about, in a sense, showing the respect for the power of Fox.
But Hillary had a lot of, the Hillary campaign liked it. And I think Bill Clinton in particular, when he said they played the race card and they planned to do this from the beginning of this race, I don't think he ever got over that.
Well, I think it's more important for us to be having the conversations about the issues versus what the platform is. I am not going to come on this show and change your mind. I love you to death. I'm not going to change your mind. But I am going to talk to your audience, and that audience is really important. Yep. And Howard Dean, in those statements, I think he's showing that respect, but he's also trying to re-get that street cred. He should have been in the cabinet. I think he deserves a little bit more respect than he's gotten.
David, I think Jammu made the most intelligent comment. Here's a massive audience available on the Fox News channel 24/7 for Democrats, and they're too gutless to come on the program. What, were they afraid of me? Have I been nothing but nice to you? Beckel comes on, he gets, I want to beat him in the head. He wants to hit me, and, but we get different views here.
It really makes very little sense. So what Dean's saying, and it's one thing for Dean to say, but this really harkens back to the White House's very concerted push. If you want to talk about a guerrilla war, this was like the overt pitched battle war, sending advisors on every show to say, Fox isn't a real news channel. It's a propaganda outlet. All of you guys should distance yourselves and shun them and delegitimize.
Is this the thugocracy you talk about in your book?
Yeah, that is part of it. This is what, when Barack Obama, as he says it, we're going to help our friends, we're going to punish our enemies. Fox News ends up on that cast of characters as one of the enemies at one point. And why attack, the network that...
Why would they attack me? You like me. We get along fine. We don't agree on everything.
What? I think the case is that people come on...
You actually said you love me.
And they try to change your mind. That is not going to happen. But your audience, that's whose hearts and minds that we should be talking to, and that's who we can change. But I do have to just address David. When you're referring to this administration as being gangster and thuggish, I think that's completely irresponsible, because why is it when George Bush was, riding high, he was a cowboy, but President Obama is thuggish and a gangster? I think there are some really dangerous things underlying that, and that's
every White House has news organizations they don't like. I can't remember one, including Nixon's, that tried to intimidate them into not being a news organization. They would put them on an enemies list, but...
Yeah, all right, we're going to come back. More with our Great American Panel straight ahead. And we continue now with our Great American Panel. All right, big news today. Eric Holder announcing that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is going to be tried by a military tribunal. I guess the first thing we can say is George Bush and Dick Cheney were right. He said that, in a way, members of Congress do not. I know this case better than them, so he's attacking Congress. But let's go back, as in the words of Warner Wolf, a local newscaster in New York. Let's show the videotape. Barack Obama, this is May in 2009.
Instead of serving as a tool to counter terrorism, Guantanamo became a symbol that helped al-Qaeda recruit terrorists to its cause. Indeed, the existence of Guantanamo likely created more terrorists around the world than it ever detained. So the record's clear. Rather than keeping us safer, the prison at Guantanamo has weakened American national security.
This is a bigger deal than is even being reported. It's not just Holden making a mistake. This was the core of the president's concept about his Middle East policy, which was to pay more respect to the Muslim world by closing down Gitmo and treating the terrorists with more respect than we were going to do in the military tribunals. The admission now that he's not going to do that, that was the theory behind the open hand to Iran. That was to some extent the theory behind the other side of the hand to Israel, to make this big reach out based on being respectful. Now he's having to pull back because it was based on an unreality. He could never have closed it down. Bush wanted to close it down. He didn't know what to do.
Interestingly, Dick Cheney said that.
Yes.
Dick Cheney said in 2009, he'll reverse himself. He has to.
And so that's symbolic of the unreality on which this important policy was based. I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the reality is that Gitmo creates terrorists. The propaganda.
It keeps terrorists in a cage.
It keeps them in jail where they belong.
No, it increases the number of terrorists that are angry at America. The propaganda, it's used as a recruiting tool. And the Obama administration was right.
That is based on the assumption that the terrorists don't hate us already. The 9/11 Commission reports that they were at war with us, and your friend Bill Clinton ignored it.
They use it as a recruiting tool.
Embassy bombings.
It brings more people in, and so yes, the administration needs to stick to their guns.
What we're seeing here is an administration that spent so much time and so much of its political capital and energy helping friends and punishing enemies in other areas, domestic areas especially, helping organized labor, devoting 99% of its attention to that. That they've had to completely give up on one of the biggest promises they made. One of the things that made people view Obama in 2008 as a breath of fresh air. And I think, that's what I mean when I talk about gangster government. I think what's dangerous.
By the way, you wanted to respond to.
This is my way of doing it. What I think is dangerous and irresponsible is when the levers of power are being controlled by someone who is willing to just go to, say, the secured creditors of Chrysler and say, we're taking your property away and giving it to a politically favored labor union. And I think that when people in power are given those kinds of tools and they abuse them, that's what, and the fact that we're fighting a war in Libya now that, he literally told Congress the bombs are falling in 90 minutes. When Reagan said something like that, it was considered a joke.
Look, the Republicans for 3 years have been doing everything they can to tie this administration's hand and not allow these people to be brought to justice.
Both houses of Congress. Cut this out.
When you look at the trial,
Schumer, the Democrat who wanted
Wait
to block
a second,
this.
Tony. Don't you think every single New Yorker would want to sit in that jury and participate in making that decision? I would love to have you in that jury box. The crime was committed here in the U.S. It should be tried here, but the Republicans tied the president's hands to make him look bad. Playing politics is not what this should be about.
If it was about playing politics, George Bush did it his entire presidency.
Bringing them to
on
justice
this.
for murdering thousands of Americans.
And that's
should have
going to
happened here
in a military tribunal,
his hands.
the way it should. All right, we're out of time. That's all the time we have left. But let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. Greta's next, and we'll see you tomorrow night.